Los Angeles, 1993. Noah Lauren was 28 years old and almost famous. He had just come off a string of promising roles in low-budget indie films, the kind with grainy camera work and plots where people smoked more than they spoke. His face was familiar, in a "hey, weren't you in that one movie with the girl who dies" sort of way. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Silver Lake that smelled like coffee grounds and old script pages. His landlord, Mrs. Fernandez, used to be a cabaret dancer in Havana and insisted on calling him mi pequeño artista, even though he was over 6 feet tall and constantly looked like he'd just rolled out of a dream he didn't finish. Noah had a quiet charm, the kind that didn't announce itself. Women noticed him, but not in the way that begged for attention. He wore thrift store coats, spoke like he read Neruda for breakfast, and somehow always had time to listen. He was still, even in the chaos of Hollywood. And then came Ivy Monroe. The first meeting set was a converted warehouse in downtown LA. The film was called Glass Horizons, a psychological drama about a teacher and a student both running from grief. It was the kind of movie that would either be a cult hit or a complete disaster. Noah was cast as Elliot, the teacher. Ivy, the last-minute replacement for the female lead, would play Lena, the haunted student with a secret. He first saw her during a lighting test. She was leaning against a prop desk, sipping a Diet Coke and laughing at something the sound guy said. Her laugh was the kind that made everyone else feel in on the joke. Loud, unapologetic, like she'd already lived 3 lives and each one had been wilder than the last. He watched her through the reflection of a dusty mirror. Then she turned, and their eyes met. It lasted all of 3 seconds. Long enough for his stomach to drop and for her to raise one eyebrow like she already knew. He was going to be important. "Nice coat," she said, walking past him. Very tortured poet meets barista. Noah blinked. "Thanks, I call it pretending I do my own laundry." She laughed. And just like that, something shifted. The spark that didn't burn out over the next 6 weeks of filming. Ivy and Noah became inseparable. Not in the gossipy, tabloid sort of way. No stolen kisses or midnight hotel sightings. They shared books, not beds, poems, not pillow talk. They spent lunch breaks discussing existential dread and the best tacos in East LA. She introduced him to Annie DeFranco. He made her read Rilke out loud. It was emotional intimacy on a level that neither of them quite knew what to do with. Friends asked if they were dating. Directors noticed the spark in their scenes and said, "Just keep doing whatever that is." They would smile, but privately they both knew they could fall in love easily, completely. Tragically, so they didn't. Instead, they made a quiet promise neither of them said out loud, not now, but maybe one day. Why they didn't date and why that hurt anyway. Ivy was rising fast. A new agent, new auditions, magazine interviews. People were calling her the next big thing, and for once, the hype felt justified. Noah, on the other hand, was restless. He was starting to feel like acting wasn't enough, that maybe his soul needed something quieter, something more permanent. He had a folder full of poems and a growing urge to disappear into the world and write about it. One night, after a wrap party where she looked like the moon dressed in sequins, she found him sitting on the rooftop of the hotel, scribbling into a notebook. "Let me guess," she said, sitting beside him. "You're writing about how I look like starlight and emotional damage." He smiled. "No, I'm writing about how I feel like I'm in love with someone I haven't earned yet." Her breath caught. They didn't speak for a full minute. Then she said, quietly, "I think I'm afraid I'd love you too much. I'd forget who I am." He nodded. That was all they said. That was enough. The goodbye that wasn't really good. And filming ended. Ivy left for a shoot in Paris. Noah stayed behind, booked a bus ticket to New Mexico, and joined a non-profit that built homes on reservations. They wrote letters. She sent postcards from every city. He sent poems scribbled on napkins. And though the world saw them walking different paths, privately, their hearts stayed oddly close, like parallel lines that refused to cross, but never drifted apart either. Years passed. Lovers came and went. Careers soared and stumbled. But in the background of it all, like a song you hum without realizing, There was always Ivy and Noah. Closing scene, 1999. 6 years La Terra Film Festival in Toronto. Ivy's new thriller is getting Oscar buzz. Noah is there promoting a short film he wrote and directed. They see each other at the bar. Older now. Weathered. Beautiful in a way only time can make someone. He smiles. She walks over. No poet coat. She teases. I left it in 93. She leans in. Shame. I was going to ask if I could borrow it. They laugh. They hug. It lingers. But again, they say goodbye. And again, it's not really goodbye. Because both of them still believe in someday. 2000, Los Angeles. Ivy Monroe was everywhere. Billboards, magazine covers, sexiest smile in Hollywood in People magazine. She had become, to the public, what she always feared privately, an idea more than a person. Her role in The Glass Diary had just earned her an Oscar nomination. Her acceptance speech, teary, charming, and quoted endlessly, "This business makes you forget who you are. I had to lose myself to find this moment." She didn't mention Noah, not out of bitterness, but because he belonged to the part of her she couldn't afford to show the world, that soft, unguarded corner that still remembered how he used to brew tea like it was a sacred ritual. But he watched, from a modest apartment in Santa Fe. Noah Lorne watched the Academy Awards on a beat-up TV balanced on a stack of books about metaphysics and jazz. When Ivy's name was called, he stood up like a proud dad, clapped like a fool, and whispered, "You did it," you said. "Start with part 3, Chad said. "You got it. Get ready. Part 3 is where we hit the heartstrings a little harder." Life is never a straight line, and for Ivy and Noah, this chapter is full of missed calls, haunting silences, and a tragedy that reopens a door they thought was sealed shut. The Quiet Promise Part 3, Missed Moments, Unsung Songs approx. 3,800 words, long-form story below, mock YouTube video transcript voiceover style, low. Emotional piano plays softly in the background narrator. Time is a quiet thief. It doesn't snatch things all at once. It takes them slowly, seconds here, glances there, until one day you wake up and realize someone you once loved has become a ghost on the edge of your memory. In this chapter of Ivy and Noah's story, we explore what happens when life pulls two people apart, not with anger, but with silence, missed calls, missed chances, and one event that brings everything back. Whether they're ready or not, the story, Missed Moments. Unsung Songs, 2003. Manhattan. The first real fracture came quietly. No explosive fight. No dramatic betrayal. Just a voicemail Ivy never returned and a letter from Noah that she forgot to open. By then, Ivy had married. His name was Julian Chase, a celebrated director, infamous for his temper and beloved for his camera work. They met on the set of Dust and Dagger, fell into each other like actors often do, fast, furiously, and entirely too publicly. Noah found out through Variety magazine. He read the headline, "Golden Girl Marries Hollywood's Rebel," and stared at it for a full 5 minutes before quietly folding the paper in half and placing it under his teacup. He didn't cry, but something in him folded to life. As it happens over the next decade, Noah carved out a quiet existence in Taos, New Mexico. He became a published poet, taught creative writing at a local college, spent afternoons volunteering at a shelter where no one recognized his face from old films. People assumed he was a man who had chosen peace, but peace and loneliness sometimes wear the same shoes. He dated, briefly, a sculptor named Leah, a painter named Carmen, all of them kind, none of them Ivy. Meanwhile, Ivy lived on screens, movies, talk shows, awards season. Her marriage, from the outside, looked golden, but on the inside, it was brittle. Julian loved her the way some men love their own reflection passionately, but only when it's flattering. He directed her into films, both praised. Behind the scenes, he chipped away at her confidence with sarcasm disguised as notes. She smiled through it, wore dresses that weighed more than her regrets, laughed at the right times. She was a masterpiece in a museum built on silence, and all the while, she thought of Noah. The moment that should have happened, but didn't. 2010. Ivy is in Santa Fe for a film shoot. She walks into a bookstore on a rainy afternoon, And there, on a display table, is a collection titled Chords Without Music, Poems by Noah Lorne. Her heart stops. She buys it without blinking. That night, she reads it cover to cover. Page 57, a poem called The Woman Who Laughs Like Rain. She knows it's about her. The next day, she walks to the address on the publisher's bio, stands outside a quaint adobe house with wind chimes whispering in the breeze. But she doesn't knock. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's timing. Maybe it's just that she's still married. She leaves a copy of her latest film on his porch. No note. No explanation. He finds it. Smiles. Doesn't call. And so, another moment passes. The tragedy that changed everything. 2014. Noah's mother dies. She was 86. A jazz pianist. His best friend. The person who used to say, "Love loud or don't love at all." The funeral is small. Ivy finds out through a mutual friend from the Glass Horizons days. She sends flowers. But this time, she also sends herself. She doesn't tell Noah she's coming. Just shows up in black jeans and a coat that smells like cedarwood and nostalgia. He's standing alone after the service, watching the horizon. Like it's about to give him an answer, she walks up beside him. "Hey, poet." He turns. Doesn't speak. Just pulls her into a hug. And for the first time in 15 years, they hold each other like a sentence finally finished. The conversation that needed to happen. They sit in his backyard. That evening, wrapped in blankets, tea steaming. In their hands, he breaks the silence first. "You married someone brilliant." She shrugs. "You didn't." He smiles. "Was I supposed to?" "I don't know. Maybe." She looks at him. Eyes soft. "I read your poem. The one with the woman and the thunderstorm." He doesn't respond. "I came to your house in Santa Fe once, years ago. I stood outside and couldn't go in." He exhales slowly. "I felt you." They sit in silence. Finally, she says it. "I never stopped wondering." He nods. "Me neither." Why they still don't kiss. You'd think they would, right? After all that time, after all those years. But they don't, because sometimes love is too sacred to rush. Because grief still hangs in the air like smoke. Because maybe now, after everything, they're beginning to understand that what they had wasn't about timing, it was about courage. And neither of them had it yet. They part ways 2 days later. She touches his cheek before leaving. Says, "Don't disappear again." He says, "Only if you don't." They smile. It's a real one this time. Postscript. 2015. Ivy divorces Julian. Quietly, no drama. No press tour. She moves to a coastal town in Oregon. Opens a small acting studio. Teaches teenagers how to breathe before they cry on stage. Noah publishes his second book, Letters to a Ghost I Never Stopped Loving. On page 3, the dedication reads, "For the woman who laughs like rain. I heard you. Always." 2016. Oregon Coast Sea was Ivy's new soundtrack. After the divorce, she moved into a small craftsman house with seafoam-colored walls and windows that begged to be opened. Her mornings were slow, tea, soft jazz, and a cat named Pablo Neruda who believed breakfast was a sacred ritual. She taught at a tiny community theater. Teens adored her. Locals respected her. The tabloids, finally bored, moved on. But her nights, that was when the ghosts came out. A surprise in a manila envelope. Noah had mailed her something. It wasn't a manuscript, not this time, just a large, weathered envelope. No return address. No note inside. Just a bundle of folded, aged papers tied with string. The label on the first page read, "Letters I wrote but never sent, 2003 to 2015 for Ivy." If she ever still wants to know. Her hands trembled. She placed the bundle on her table, stared at it like it might catch fire. Pablo the cat sniffed it, clearly judging her for hesitating. She waited until after midnight. Then, she untied the string. Letter 1, October 17th, 2003. I saw your wedding photos in a magazine today, Ivy. You look like a secret trying to smile. I hope you're happy, truly. But part of me wishes I had said something, anything, before the ring. But silence is what I do best, isn't it? I guess that's why I'm writing instead of calling. I don't want to interrupt your life. I just want to remember how it felt to be part of it. She read 10 letters that night. Some were short, One was a poem disguised as a birthday wish. One was just a list of things he missed: your laugh, your eye roll when I said something vaguely philosophical, the way you made silence feel like an answer instead of a punishment. She cried through all of them. Not big, cinematic sobs, just quiet tears that felt like something old finally loosening its grip. Letter 23, February 2009. I think I saw you today. A woman on a bench in Albuquerque with your exact posture. She was reading a script and biting the end of her pen. My heart leapt before my brain caught up. Isn't it wild how we carry pieces of each other in strangers? She clutched that one to her chest. Because yes, that's what it was. She had seen Noah in every bookstore, every brooding stranger, every man who carried stillness like a second skin. She didn't sleep that night. A letter that was never finished. Tucked near the bottom was a page that ended mid-sentence. I think I'm dying, Ivy. I don't say that to scare you. I say it because if this is what life has left for me, I want to use it well. There's a diagnosis, something rare. The doctors, it stopped there. No signature, no date. She felt her throat tighten. She read it again. Then she did what she hadn't done in years. She picked up the phone and called him. The first call in over a year. Noah answered on the second ring. His voice was raspy, but unmistakably him. Warm, worn, wise. Ivy, she exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for 20 years. You sent me your soul in a manila envelope. He chuckled, only the edited version. Are you sick? Pause. Double quotes. Yes. What is it? Doesn't matter tonight. Yes, it does. He sighed. It's slow, but it's coming. Kind of like winter, or karma. I should have called sooner. No, he said gently. We call when we're ready. She said nothing for a moment. Then, softly, I wasn't ready to know you loved me that much. He replied, you didn't know, Ivy. I've only ever written about you. The trip that wasn't for closure-ish flew to New Mexico that weekend. He met her at the airport, leaning on a cane and wearing the same kind of coat he wore in 1993. They didn't hug right away. They just looked at each other like two pages of the same book, finally lined up. He smiled. You still make the air taste different, she replied. You still talk like a man who fell in love with metaphors first. They laughed. Then they hugged, and it was like no time had passed at all. Living instead of regretting. Over the next few days, she stayed in his guest room, made soup, read aloud from his poems. They talked like people who had earned the right to speak in half-sentences. Noah showed her his unfinished manuscript, a memoir titled If Not This Life. She said, that's a terrible title. He replied, good. It's not for sale, just for you. One night, while they watched an old black and white film, she asked, why didn't you send those letters? He looked at her for a long time, then said, because I didn't think I had the right to ask you to choose me when you'd already chosen someone else. She nodded slowly. Then let me choose now. They didn't fall in love. They rose into it. There were no big declarations, no rings, no promises of forever. Just two people waking up to breakfast and the ocean of things they never said, finally being said. They held hands like teenagers, took walks like retirees. She kissed the corner of his mouth one morning and said, don't die yet. He grinned. I'll check my calendar. 2017. Taos, New Mexico. Ivy never moved back to LA. Not even when agents begged. Not even when an old producer dangled a streaming comeback role in front of her like a shiny carrot. She had done fame. She had worn the glittery mask. Now, she wanted a life with dirt under its fingernails, with mismatched coffee mugs, with Noah, whose steps had slowed, whose breathing sometimes sounded like rust, but whose soul, still the clearest thing she'd ever known. Mornings at the edge of time there. Mornings were sacred. She'd make tea, humming some 70s folk song out of tune. He'd sit in the sunroom, wrapped in an old blanket, notebook in lap, scribbling half-thoughts and metaphors about the cat sleeping in a patch of sunlight. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't need to. Once, she asked him, do you miss the man you used to be? He smiled and said, no, but I miss the urgency of believing I had all the time in the world. They were both in their early 60s now. The mirror was less kind. But their laughter, that aged beautifully. The diagnosis, finally spoken pulmonary. Fibrosis. Slow, incurable, progressive. He had known for a while. But now the doctors were using words like months and comfort care. When he told Ivy, she didn't cry, she didn't flinch. She just leaned in, kissed his forehead, and said, okay, then let's live the hell out of those months. And they did. What that looked like. Kathy bought a beat-up camper van, painted it turquoise, named it the Quiet Promise. Over the next 3 months, they drove Sedona, Zion, Big Sur, a lake in Montana where Noah claimed he'd once written a haiku. That got published in a magazine nobody read. They collected pebbles from every place, labeled each one with a date and a small note. This is the day we danced in the desert and didn't care who was watching. This is the day we got caught in the rain and kissed under a gas station awning. Sometimes Ivy took pictures. Sometimes Noah wrote poems about the pictures. Once, she asked, what would our wedding vows have sounded like? He replied, I promise to notice, that's all, every breath, every change. Every morning you walk into the room. She kissed him then, hard, like a yes. No wedding, no rings, just everything else. People assumed they were married. At diners, hotel check-ins, ranger stations, people called them Mr. and Mrs. Lorne. They never corrected anyone. But one evening, under a canopy of stars in Colorado, Ivy asked him, did you ever regret not marrying me? He looked at her, full of moonlight and weariness, and said, no, because I got everything that matters. You, this, us. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I'd have worn a hideous dress for you, you. No, I'd have written vows that would have made our guests sob and drink more wine. They laughed, but neither of them said the words out loud, the ones they'd both held for decades. I love you. Not because it wasn't true, but because now they didn't need to say it. One day, he fell in a motel in Utah. After a walk along a canyon rim, Noah collapsed. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like a leaf dropping from a tree. Ivy was there before his body hit the floor, whispering his name, holding his hand. He was hospitalized for 2 weeks. The doctor gave a soft look that said more than words ever could. Ivy nodded. She had known this was coming. Still, knowing didn't soften it. A promise made in a hospital bed. He looked at her with tired eyes. I don't want you to watch me fade. She held his hand tighter. Too late. I mean it. I want you to remember me from the road. The dancing. The poems. She whispered. I will. But I'm staying. Ivy. She leaned in, nose to nose. You stayed when I left. For decades. Let me return the favor. His eyes filled. He nodded. That night, she crawled into the hospital bed beside him, wires and all, and held him like she was keeping him from slipping into the sky. The final trip. They never made it back to Taos. Noah died 2 weeks later. In his sleep, with his notebook on the bedside table. The last entry read, we were everything but married, but we promised each other more than most ever do. She taught me how to stay. I taught her how to be still, and if this is the end, it was worth every missed beginning. After Ivy took his ashes back to New Mexico, spread them on a hill where they used to sit and read out loud. She kept the turquoise van, still drives it sometimes, still finds pebbles in the cushions with notes in his handwriting. She opened his final manuscript. Published it under both their names, The Quiet Promise, a love story in poems and pebbles. It became a bestseller, not because it was trendy. But because it was true. 2025, Portland, Oregon. Lights were warm, the cameras silent. Ivy sat on a vintage armchair in a studio built to look like someone's living room, the kind of cozy that made even confessionals feel like conversations. She wore no makeup, save for mascara and a bit of blush. Her silver hair was pulled back, her fingers resting lightly in her lap. She looked like a woman who'd made peace with time. The interviewer smiled gently. Okay, she said, shuffling notes. Last question. I promise. Ivy nodded. The interviewer looked up. You and Noah Lorne. Everyone always wondered, why didn't you ever marry him? The room felt quieter than usual. Ivy blinked. Then she smiled. Not a performance smile, but something lived in, something deep. And for the first time in years, she told the truth. Because we didn't have to. That's the short version. She began, voice steady but soft. But if you want the real answer, it's not a headline. It's a story." The interviewer leaned in. Ivy looked just past the camera, as if Noah was sitting across from her. "We were young when we met, not teenagers, not kids, but still too young to know that timing can be both everything and nothing. We danced around each other for years, like the world was this great puzzle, and we were always one piece off from fitting. He wrote poems about me. I pretended I didn't know. I married someone else. He vanished like fog. And yet, he was always there, like the background hum of a song you didn't realize you knew every word to." She smiled again, smaller, this time. "And then one day, when we were older, slower, maybe wiser, we found each other again. And we didn't need rings. We didn't need a minister or an aisle or a DJ playing at last. We had each other, every day, and that was enough. The love that didn't need proof." Ivy spoke for almost 10 minutes without stopping. No script, just memory. He was the quietest man I ever met, but also the most present. When Noah loved you, you knew it. Not from the words, but from the way he remembered how you took your coffee, the way he saved receipts from bookstores so he could write the date on the back and remember what you were reading. He never stopped listening, even when you weren't talking. The interviewer asked gently, "Did you ever regret not marrying him?" Ivy looked down at her hands, then back up. "No. I regret not loving him sooner, but not the rest. We made a promise once, not out loud, not in some big moment, just one of those unspoken agreements, that if we couldn't be everything, we'd be everything else." The Book That Said It All documentary team showed a clip of her reading from the book. She and Noah published together, The Quiet Promise, a love story in poems and pebbles. Her voice wavered slightly as she read the final entry he'd ever written. "If I could ask the world for one more thing, it wouldn't be time, it wouldn't be youth, it would be her. Just her. One more morning of her singing in the kitchen, badly. One more tea with too much lemon. One more afternoon where I pretend I don't notice how beautiful she still is when she laughs." She finished reading. The room was still. Legacy, love, and letting go. Ivy now teaches writing and storytelling at a community center. Not acting, not anymore. She says storytelling saved her, that everyone should be allowed to leave something behind besides taxes and regrets. Noah's pebbles, the ones from their travels, sit in a display case above her fireplace, each one labeled dated, with a little poem tucked beneath. Visitors always ask if it's an art piece. She always says, "No, it's a love story." Closing moments of the interviewer, now teary-eyed herself, smiled softly. "So, in the end, was he the love of your life?" Ivy didn't hesitate. "No, he was the life of my love." Silence, then Ivy added, her eyes twinkling, "And if there's another life after this one, I like to think he's waiting, with a notebook, a terrible coat, and a poem he'll never admit is about me." They both laughed, and the cameras stopped rolling, but Ivy didn't stop smiling. Final narration from video transcript. Music swells, slow orchestral strings, rising gently into light narrator. "Not all love stories end and I do. Some end and I stayed." Ivy and Noah didn't need a wedding to build a life. They didn't need rings to mark their devotion. They needed time. And when they finally had it, they used every moment. So the next time someone asks if true love is real, think of them. Think of letters never sent, promises kept, and the kind of bond that doesn't fade with the credits. Because sometimes the quietest promise is the loudest love of all. The end, but the love lives on.